There we go. All right. So the Kentucky statewide contract, we've gone over this once before, but we're going to go over it again, as this is going to be the preferred contract that we use anytime that we're writing an offer on behalf of a buyer. So since we've gone over it before, I'm going to kind of stick with the highlights of this on just what information goes in what lines, because on the previous time I went over it, we went line by line and kind of explained what each section meant. You can always reference that video, of course, on our YouTube channel, or go back to your emails and the video was sent out as well. So one important thing to note, I always like to call this out, is there is a date and an MLS number at the very top here. So you can kind of see that. Let's see if it'll let me highlight it right there. That I just noticed that gets missed because it's kind of at the top around all the other bold fonts. So just wanted to highlight that and make sure that you fill that out. From there, the next section, when we're filling out lines, these lines here, is all about the listing company. So who has it listed? What's the listing company? For example, Keller Williams Heartland or Keller Williams Elite. What's the agent's name and / license number? Matt Brown, 218055. Agent phone number would be, what's my phone number? Obviously the office telephone. So agent email. If there's two agents, or maybe you're selling a team listing, a lot of times I'll put in the team name here. So my team's 270 Homes Group. So I would write that in there. If it's a second agent, maybe there's two agents working the deal. Co-listing is what that's called. Then you can put the second agent name and license number, phone number, and then obviously the office number if it's different than the one above. Keep in mind, you always want to fill in every single blank. So even if there isn't a co-op agent or anything in this section here, then you would draw dashes through it or write in NA something that just shows that, somebody can't come back in and backfill over top of you. The selling company is considered the buyer's representatives. And if you're filling this out, most likely that's going to be you. So you're going to put in our brokerage name here, your name, your phone number, the office phone number, your email, and then if you're on a team, you can put in the team name here, or if you're representing a buyer with another agent, kind of like a dual representation or co-agent, then you would fill out the co-agent's information here. Otherwise, you would just put dashes in each of these lines. Then you're going to print the names of the buyers and sellers. Most of the time, you're not going to have the seller's info at this point. So I would just kind of draw a line through that. Of course, you could call the other agent and get the seller's name as well. It just makes it easier for title companies, and everybody else, the lenders, everybody who's going to see the contract to know who's who and things like that. So this is something new that they've added in fairly recently in the last few years. So next one is the offer. So what property are you buying? So we're going to put the address in here. You put the address of 123 Main Street, for example. Oh, sorry, I had to let Sarah in real quick. Oh, admit all. Admit. There we go. Okay, now she's coming in. All right, so we're going to put the address of the property that we're buying here, as well as the deed book, page, block number, lot number, sublot, and map and parcel, or as much information as you could find and fill out inside of there. Just a little hint, you can get all of this through the PBA. If you can't get it for whatever reason, like maybe there's not a block number, but there is a lot number, again, you would just write dashes in here in this section for anything that you don't have the information on. But again, you can reference the PBA to be able to find all of that info. And then you're going to put what county is the property located in. Very simply, Hardin County, Davis County, Henderson, so on and so forth. Next is going to talk about improvements and fixtures, everything that's attached to the house and stays with the house. So you can see the list here. I'll let you all read that individually, but all of these things are considered fixtures and they would stay with the home unless it specifically says that they do not. And you would actually fill that out in line 37. So for example, if they were going to take gas logs, they had a special set of gas logs and they wanted to take those with them, then down here on line 37, you need to write gas logs on this line. Other than that, then everything's going to stay with the house, and including appliances to remain, you would check the boxes on appliances, refrigerator, stove, dishwasher, microwave, anything else. And then on these two lines, you can write in anything else. Some things that I would typically see on that would be, sometimes I'll see storage buildings, sometimes I'll see garage door openers, things along those lines that would, hold on, I'm getting a little feedback. Let's see if I can. this. There we go. Okay. So again, appliances that stay, or if they have extra appliances that aren't listed, maybe they have a wine cooler or a ice maker or something along those lines that need to stay, then you would fill it out in these bottom two lines. As far as we already talked about fixtures and what they are, and again, it's kind of these things, but there is more. A fixture, the way to think about this is a fixture of anything that is attached to the house that if it were to be removed would leave the home in a unfinished condition. Next line right here on line 39 is fuel tanks. A lot of times the fuel tanks may not be owned. They might just be leased. So if the property has a fuel tank, you're going to want to ask the listing agent, does the seller own it? Do they lease it? Things like that. And does it remain or does it not remain? And then you would check the boxes accordingly. So if they own it, they check here. If it's leased, they check here. If it remains, they check this box. If it does not remain, check this box. If they own it, it's usually going to stay. If they lease it, they're either your buyer's going to have to transfer the lease into their name, or they're going to come pick it up and then your buyer would have to lease a new one. Just FYI for you. Line 2, pretty simply, purchase price. What are you paying for the home? Next line 42 is the earnest money. How much are you putting down for the earnest money? And then kind of the next about 6 lines is all about how are they going to pay for it. So how much are they putting down in cash? You would fill out this percentage. And this is one of the things I do like about the state contract is it doesn't make you calculate the exact number. Somebody's doing, an FHA loan at 3.5%, instead of calculating exactly what that would be on a $255,000 house, you can just write in the 3.5%. Now, keep in mind, we fill out every line that's possible to be filled. So if you put in the dollar amount, you write a dollar amount here, then put your dash here. If you're doing just the percentage, put your dash going through here and then fill out your percentage on this line. Okay. The next thing, and again, this is just cash. So this is like their down payment outside of earnest money. And then the next thing is, are they getting an equity line? Are they getting a gift from somebody else? Or are they doing something other, such as pulling from a 401k, anything along those? Keep in mind, cash means cash in the bank, meaning they literally have the cash in the bank. It's not pulling from anywhere else. They're not waiting on it. They don't have to get it from a sale of stocks, anything along those lines. If any of those other things come into play, then one of these 3 items need to be checked. And then same thing, you're going to put the dollar amount or the percentage. And it can be a combination of everything. They could put down 10% in cash and then 10% from selling some of their stocks, for example. You just have to disclose where the money's coming from. The next part is all about financing. So this whole section, basically finishing out page 1, is financing. At the beginning, we're going to check what type of loan are they getting. Are they getting conventional, FHA? Is it a fixed rate or an adjustable rate? Is it VA? Is it rural housing or USDA? Or is it some other type of loan? And if it is, then typically that's going to have an addendum. That would be something like a 203k rehab loan, something along those lines is typically what I would see in there. The next thing is, how long are they going to amortize it? Meaning, how long are their payments going to last for? Typically that's going to be 15, 20, or majority of the time it's going to be 30 years. Interest rate not to exceed X percent. Now, this isn't necessarily the percent that they are locking in for. That is not today's rate. It's what's the maximum rate that they're willing to move forward buying this house. So right now we know interest rates are, in the high 6s. Let's just call it 7 just for easy. You might put in here 7.5, meaning interest rates go up. As long as they don't go up above 7.5, the buyer can still move forward with this. If it all of a sudden were to jump up to let's just say you put in 8 and all of a sudden it jumps up to 10, that would give the buyer an out. And the reason that you want to fill this out as a higher number than what they're locking in for is gives a little wiggle room to be able to move that rate, but it also protects the buyer in the sense of if the interest rate jumps to this, they might not be able to afford the house anymore monthly, and they don't want it, and that wouldn't be fair to them to be on the hook to be able to buy the home in there. So if you got any questions on that, just call me. I'll gladly help you out. And then adjustments are limited to the following. For an adjustable rate, what's the maximum? So can adjust, 2 points over 5 years, anything along those lines. Talk to the lender that's done your pre-approval, and they'll be able to fill you in all of that information as well. The next thing is the buyer must apply for the loan within X number of days. So you're going to put in how many days do they have to apply for this. Typically, it's going to be 5 days is what I typically see in here. Basically, from the time we get a contract, that within 1 week, they need to go and apply for the loan. And that helps protect closing dates and then other dates that we'll discuss a little bit later on. Again, you can read through the rest of this of what happens if they don't apply for the loan. Right now, we're just talking what to fill in on what lines. Property located at is going to be the property address. Lender contact information, you will include the name, the phone number at a minimum. I prefer name, phone number, and email. And that way, everybody has all of the lender information. Keep in mind, side note, let me drink of water real quick. If you change loan terms, if you change lenders, if you change the type of loan, if you change anything along those lines, then the seller has the right to know. So you need to do an addendum that would state that and make sure everybody signs off on it. The next is how much the next section has to do with what we would call closing costs. So how is the seller paying on behalf of the buyer any type of closing cost or anything along those lines? And you would check one of three boxes. Either you check here that they are not, you check here that they are paying up to a dollar amount, or you would check here that they're paying up to a percentage. So keep in mind, different loans have different amounts that you're allowed to maximize out at. So make sure you talk to your lender and get an estimate. If you're going to ask for closing costs, you need to talk to the lender and get an estimate of how much do they need and what's the maximum percentage. And then you can decide what to ask for inside of there. Buyer broker compensation. This was newly added based on the NAR rules. So it says that the seller agrees to pay the buyer's broker on behalf of the buyer compensation as follows. And then they're either going to check percentage, and then you would put in what percent of the gross purchase price, or if it's a flat fee, then you would fill out this one as well. So percentage would be, I'm going to pay X percent of the or I expect to get paid X percent of the purchase price by the seller. Flat fee would be, I want to get paid X thousands of dollars as a flat fee. So that you get to pick which one of those inside of there. The next thing we're going to fill out is all about earnest money. And this first part, highly encourage you all to either go back and watch my previous video where I broke this down line by line, or if you've already done that, then right inside of here is who's holding the earnest money. So is it, for example, staying at our office? Is it staying at somebody else's office? Is it staying at a title company? And then it also, keep in mind, it does say that the buyer's agent must have it delivered within 3 days and held in this escrow account that you fill out here. All right, next one is section 5 is all about appraisal. So that's going to go all the way down here to line 100. And it's basically going to say either you check this box is contingent, is not contingent on an appraisal. Keep in mind, if you're getting a loan, the lender's 99% of the time going to make you get an appraisal. Sometimes they will waive them in lieu of something else. But for filling this out, the appraisal waiver is really about a cash deal. If they don't want to waive it because they're doing cash, they can do that. Part B is for transactions involving a lender. You're going to check this, and it's going to say contingent upon the lender's first appraiser establishing a value that's equal to greater of the purchase price. Or the other option for cash people or private financing would be like a hard money loan or contract on deed. You could check box C, and they will have a certain number of days to go out and get an appraisal to make sure that the home appraises for what they're paying for. And then if it doesn't, lines 96 through 100, all talk about what happens. Basically, if a home doesn't appraise, long story short, you can read through that. But long story short, the buyer gets the right to renegotiate the contract. If you cannot reach an agreement that is at the appraisal price, the buyer would need to bring cash to the table above and beyond what it appraised for in order to be able to close. It also points out what happens with earnest money should they not be able to reach an agreement, which ultimately is the earnest money goes back to the buyer. Prorations, this section is just all about prorated taxes. You all know that by this point. Section 7 is limited warranty. So this takes us to the bottom of page 2, is all about the limited warranty. And inside the limited warranty, we're going to fill out a couple of things. We're going to, if we're asking the seller to pay for it, we're going to check this box on line 107 and say how much it is. For example, just making up a number, $600 towards the purchase of a limited warranty selected by the buyer or the seller. If you check the buyer box, then this means the buyer gets to select what company it is and what home warranty it is. If you check the seller, then we're asking the seller to buy a warranty up to how much, the warranty costs, but letting them pick it. If the buyer is going to buy the home warranty and isn't asking the seller to pay for it, then you would check this box on line 109. If the property is a new construction and automatically comes with a home warranty, then you'll check the box on 110. And then if the buyer waives the option to purchase a limited home warranty, you would check the box on 111. You're ultimately going to check one of these 4 boxes if somebody's getting a home warranty. Okay. Property, then at the top of page 3, same thing. We're going to plug in the address. Don't forget to include city, state, and zip. And then the next thing is all about seller disclosures. So this whole section here between lines 116 and 124 acknowledges the seller disclosures. And basically it's two things. You either check box A, that the buyer has received the seller disclosures and has reviewed them and agreed to them. Part B, or excuse me, signed off on them, I guess I should say, which is basically acknowledging the condition of the home. As far as the seller input, because they'll get a home inspection. We'll get to that part in a little bit. And then part B is the buyer has not received the seller property condition form. And then the buyer's agent shall request the seller to complete this form and present the buyer to the buyer prior to the execution of the contract. So check box A if you have the disclosures, box B if you do not. I always recommend you try to get them before filling out an offer, by the way. Part 9, this is going to be all about lead-based paint. So if the property is built before 1978, you check box A. If it's built after if it was built after 1978, you check box A, meaning it was 1978 or newer. If it was older than 1978, 1977 or older, you would check box B, and it even tells you what information you have to give to the buyer at that point, which is going to be your lead-based paint package and disclosure as well. Then from that point, the buyer has options. If it was built before 1978, they have the option to either waive the right to get a lead-based paint inspection, and you would check box 1, and they would need to initial here, or they can set a certain amount of time in order to get a lead-based paint inspection. If they're going to do that, you would check box 2, and then they have either 10 days or you can set it to match your home inspection days. I know a lot of people do 14 days on home inspections, so you could write in 14 days here. And then once you get your lead-based paint inspected, then you need to set how long the seller has to respond to the buyer's request. So if lead-based paint is found, you're probably going to request for that to be remedied in some way, shape, or form. How long does the seller have to respond to that? And typically we're going to see somewhere between 3 and 5 days that goes into this point. Okay. Section 10, it starts the beginning of the conversation about home inspections. This just tells you all about home inspections. Keep in mind, time is of the essence. This is probably the most important section in regards to making sure that you understand it and know exactly what it means. And again, like I said in the beginning of the call, go back and reference our previous YouTube video where I go through all of this. Next month, I'm going to go through it all again. But again, for this class, it's all about what are we putting in where as far as filling it out. At the top of page 4, and at the top of every page for that matter, we're going to put the address in again. And then the buyer gets to make decisions on how they want to handle the home inspection. And this is in from lines 158 all the way down to line 174. So on line 159, they're going to check this box that says, unless it's discovered the seller failed to disclose material defect, which was known or reasonably or should have been known, buyer accepts the property in its condition as of the date of the offer. So basically, if you're not going to get a home inspection, we're going to check box 1. If you're going to get a home inspection, and we recommend everybody always gets a home inspection, then we're going to check box 2 on line 163, and then set how many days do we want to allow for the buyer to both get the home inspection and request repairs. So I see this done incorrectly a lot. So I'm going to stop here and make sure I explain this. What I typically see is people will fill out this with just say 10 days, and then they're going to fill out this box for 5 days and this box for 5 days. I'll explain what those are later. What they typically think is, oh, I got 10 days to get the inspection. Then I have 5 more days to actually request any repairs that I want done. But if you read this top section right here, it says within blank days, buyer may inspect the property for any purpose at reasonable times at the buyer's expense. Within that same inspection period, the buyer shall in writing either. So you have to both get it inspected and in writing request that either A, you accept it, B, you've hired an inspector and you are going to, you received the report and you're either going to void the contract or you're going to ask the seller to make repairs, corrections, replacements, so on and so forth. Then once that's done, so that all has to happen in this first time frame. Then once that's done, the seller will have X number of days, again, typically 3 to 5 days, to respond to your buyer's request. If the seller does not agree, then usually there's a little negotiation back and forth here. But let's just say the seller ultimately doesn't agree, then within X number of days, then the parties must either agree on what needs to get done, or they'll release the contract. And you can say the last best and final response. If all parties do not agree to the terms they're within blank number of days, again 3 to 5 days, then the contract shall become null and void. And then it says what happens from there. And you can kind of read through that on lines 170 to 174. All right, next sections, we don't have anything to fill out, but there is a verification of square footage section. There is a survey section, should anybody be curious of where the lot lines are or exactly how much land they're buying, things along those lines. And this outlines how that works. And then right here, there is a section to fill out in regards to surveys. And this is if they want to get a survey, then you're going to check this box on line 184. And then they're going to say how many days they have to both get the survey or to void the contract, and to void the contract should the survey come back incorrect, something along those lines. So keep in mind, time is of the essence, and you both have to get the survey and notify the seller in writing of voiding the contract should the survey come back with some information that maybe wasn't disclosed or wasn't incorrect before. Okay. Next section is all about closing date. So very simply, you have two options here, and it's going to be either A, we're going to close on or before a exact date. So you would put in 31st of March, 2025, or you're going to check box B and you're going to close within some sort of time frame, meaning we're going to close between March 31st, 2025 and April 15th, 2025. So this gives you a little bit more flexibility. It's not a hard set date. This just says as long as we're within this range. Part of the reason that they put in this section is we're seeing a lot where closings, not so much right now, but in the past where closings weren't happening on the exact date, we're having to do addendums just to extend by a day or two. So a lot of people have selected to go inside of ranges. It is important to note that both the buyer and seller must mutually agree. Here it is right here. Closing date must be agreeable to the buyer and seller so long as the date is within this time frame. Okay. Next one is possession. So you're either going to do, this is section 13 right here. So possession is either simultaneously at closing. When you sign the deed, you're going to get the keys and start to move in or do anything you want at that point. Or by B, by a certain time on a certain days after closing date not included. So it says basically the day we close doesn't count. The next day after that would be considered day one, following day two, day three, so on and so forth. You can set how long that's going to happen. Condition at possession. It just main thing to know inside of here again is the property must be broom cleaned, and it must not have any personal property must be removed, and then there must not be any damage that was not there at the time of making the offer. Section 15 is you do have the right to do a walkthrough. I get asked this question a lot. So you can do a walkthrough prior to closing. And then if there is delayed possession, like you outline on 198 up top here, if there is a delayed possession, then you can walk through after possession as well. So two walkthroughs. If you're getting possession and closing at the same time, obviously there's only going to be one. If there are leases involved, this typically only applies to rental properties. Either A, the seller wants there are no valid leases, so they're going to check that box. Or if it is being rented out or there's leases involved in any way, shape, or form, they would check B here. And then it says what happens with those, basically that all the deposits would have to transfer, things along those lines. And then we get to page 5, and there are 7 pages of this, but we're almost through the most of it. On page 5, again, property address up at the very top. And then it talks about warranties, if there are any warranties that they do transfer, things like that. And then title. So title, general warranty deed. So that you can see right here, it says general warranty deed. That's the highest form of home ownership. It means it's free of any loans, encumbrances, anything along those lines, short of governmental setback lines and things like that. And then kind of explains, how title works and things, as well as a little line about a title examination does not cover everything. Just FYI for you, most title examinations go back only 30 years. They don't go back any further than that, even if the home has been transferred multiple times, but prior to 30 years. So it could not be caught, which is part of the reason that we encourage everybody to get owner's title insurance as well. And then the next section is all about owner's title insurance. So it just tells what that is. And then they can choose right here to waive owner's title insurance. I'm going to encourage you to tell your clients to never waive it. They get to make the decision on if they don't want it prior to closing. But if they waive this, then it makes it a little, I'm not going to say it makes it harder to get, but it's automatically waived. I'm just not a big fan of waiving rights unless they know for sure they're not going to do it. Next, you have notices. This is all about if you sell a condo, there's a seller certificate that must be included inside of that. Risk or loss, if there's damage to the property, what happens there? Additional disclosures such as fair housing, things like that. You can see all of that. Consumer guide to agency relationships and agency disclosures. Love this because it's a great reminder of the other forms that are needed anytime that we're making an offer. And then, of course, compensation. Who pays who and how does that work? And then notices, and then severability. What happens if this contract cannot be enforced? Then we're going to get down to page 6, which is all about all the other things that we haven't already covered. So you're going to put in the address here. And then if there's any other provisions, any other addendums, anything along those lines, you're going to fill those in here. So if it is contingent upon a property closing, for example, so a buyer needs to sell their house in order to buy this house, you would put those types of contingencies, things like that in here, or maybe even first right of refusals, things like that. And then we get to the very bottom, one more property address, and then here's where everybody's going to sign. So the buyers are going to give the seller until a certain amount of time in order to be able to receive this, and then to respond back, either accept, reject, or counteroffer. And then everybody's going to print, or excuse me, the buyers are going to print and sign. And then the seller is going to do one of three things. They're either going to accept it, they're going to reject it, they're going to counteroffer it. They're going to sign. If they are counteroffering, they're going to write out what the differences are in the counteroffer. Another reason I really like this state form, and I'm pushing us all to start using this, is it keeps everything on one package, if you will, versus before you would have an offer and it's its own PDF, and you'd have a counteroffer over here. The counteroffer gets lost, and the bank never knows how much is actually, what exactly is happening, who's paying who, things along those lines. So, and then once the buyer receives the counteroffer, they would respond down here at the very bottom. So that's how you fill out the new statewide purchase agreement. Again, I am a huge fan of the statewide agreement. I think everybody should be using that going forward. And I actually just was talking to Cheryl and working with DocuSign on getting the newest statewide, because a new one just came out in February, on getting that uploaded into our DocuSign. So over the course of the next, I'd say 2 or 3 days, we'll have this document available to you. But I did want to go ahead and go over on how you fill that out. So if y'all don't have any questions, that's what we have for the purchase agreement and statewide contracts. Keep in mind, I will go over purchase agreements every single first Wednesday of the month, and I'm going to go over listing agreements the third Wednesday of every month. And then between those, on the second and fourth Wednesdays, barring holidays and or vacations, things like that, I'm going to mix in some of the random documents that you use from time to time. So appreciate y'all joining us. If you ever have any questions, please reach out to me and let me know. And as always, keep in mind, the first couple of purchase agreements that you write, 3 to be exact, please send those over to myself and Kelly so that we can review them, and just make sure that you have everything filled out correctly before you send it to your client. All right. Appreciate y'all. Have a great day.